In today's video, we have all the latest updates on players like Brock Boeser, Claude Giroux, and PK Subban ahead of the NHL trade deadline. Plus, we have some big signings as well, including a signing in Toronto and Philadelphia. We have several key injury updates as well, and some important news from the OHL. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and trade rumors today as we get a little bit closer here to the NHL trade deadline. So of course, let's start with the news from the OHL. So the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League, part of the Canadian Junior Hockey League, they have announced today that the Flint Firebirds general manager and president Eric Christensen has been expelled from the league. So he's basically banned and done. So essentially what's been happening here, I believe there was an investigation and it was believed to be regarding comments made that are, I guess, in violation of their harassment, abuse, and diversity policy. So I don't know exactly what was said, but certainly not a good look for them. That franchise has had its fair share of controversy in the last 5, 6, 7 years. So certainly unfortunate to see that kind of continue. And the OHL is also investigating executives for the Niagara Ice Dogs. The executives there are believed to have been exchanging some inappropriate comments as well through some kind of a group chat or something. I don't know the full extent of that. I know Sportsnet's Jeff Merrick, who covers the junior quite closely and seems to be very knowledgeable about the scene there, has had some reports today on those matters. So we'll see where that goes. I'm sure there'll be more details likely come out here in the coming days. Now, as I mentioned, we have a couple of important signings here. One more, a little bit more important than the other. The Maple Leafs have signed forward Kyle Clifford to a 2-year contract extension. Clifford's mostly played in the minors, but still he gets extended at $762,000. He can be somebody who they can use for playoffs, can be a fourth line player when needed. Otherwise, can play for the Toronto Marlies and be a good veteran guy and be obviously good for the good leader, good development for a guy for the younger players to be around. So nothing too significant on that front, but certainly the other bigger signing today comes from Philadelphia in the signing of defenseman Rasmus Ristolainen, who was kind of regarded as being a potential trade target. The pending unrestricted free agent defenseman was drawing interest, but we know the Flyers, who certainly tried to remake their blue line last offseason, they acquired him, they acquired Ryan Ellis. But even they've certainly had a terrible season. Obviously, Ellis has been hurt a lot this year. That's played a role in it as well as several other players that have dealt with injuries. And certainly going to be a team that I think is transformed a fair bit. But Ristolainen is a player that they gave up a lot last year to acquire him from the Sabres. And it does appear that management and ownership are quite fond of him for what he brings, especially for, I guess, a right shot second pair D-man. I know myself, I'm a little on the fence on the deal. I mean, it's a 5-year deal with an average annual value of $5.1 million. So certainly not, an extraordinarily huge contract, but still it's a little bit less than he's making currently. I don't know. He's kind of one of those polarizing players that doesn't, sometimes gets a lot of attention, but not always for the best reasons. We'll see where this goes. But like I said, they gave up a lot to get him. I think they felt pressure to make sure that they kept him in the fold. He had made comments not long ago saying he was really interested in playing playoff hockey, that he felt his style of play would be, a lot better in a 7-game series, more so than a regular season. And I would probably tend to agree with that. But it kind of made it sound like he was, maybe leaning towards leaving to get to a place where he could get to the playoffs faster. But clearly they threw enough money at him to kind of make him reconsider and keep him in the fold there in Philadelphia. But I don't think they're going to be completely done when it comes to transforming that blue line. Obviously he'll stay, Ryan Ellis will stay, but there's some talk and some wondering what that might mean for the future of Travis Sanheim. I know Darren Dreger's made that comment himself as well, wondering if Sanheim might be made available. Maybe not, maybe before the trade deadline, but more so likely in the offseason would be my guess, where he does have some term remaining on the contract. But Sanheim's a player that they very well could part with. I mean, they also have Ivan Provorov, who's been some talk around him, but I think they'll try to keep Provorov and try to, get him a full season with Ellis to see if they can make him be the top pair guy that they're hoping he could be. I mean, it's just not really working out for him in that kind of role so far, in my opinion at least. But we'll see where that goes. But some big signings there, and it could lead to some other moves that we see in that regard. Now, the Leafs actually on top of signing Kyle Clifford also signed Carl Dahlstrom to a 1-year contract extension, and it's a 2-way deal as well. Now, we got some pretty significant injury updates, so it could lead to other moves as well, because some of these players may be out longer term, could end up getting some LTIR relief for their or salary cap for their existing teams. So we'll see where it goes. Vegas, for example, is going to be out with a few key players today. Riley Smith is out, and Robin Lehner has left and gone back to Vegas to be tested, I guess, to determine the extent of whatever injury he's dealing with now. I believe they said it was a lower body injury, which makes us think it's something different than the shoulder he was dealing with before, but I'm not really sure what to make of that. But certainly Leonard's had his fair share of health concerns as of late, and I'm not entirely convinced that he's done playing through the upper body injury that he previously had. So again, we'll have to see what Vegas will do. I know not making the playoffs or not even winning a round is not something that they're going to deem acceptable in ownership and management level. So I would not be shocked, as I've said before, for them to find a way to get some goaltending reinforcements, but they have so many players that have been in and out of the lineup and injured into LTIR quite deeply here, like Tampa was last year, that it'd be interesting to see how they can try to maneuver around it. So again, we'll see what happens with Vegas. Another big important update, another goalie in Toronto, Jack Campbell, is going to be out for a minimum of 2 weeks, possibly longer, with a rib injury. According to comments today from Sheldon Keefe and some of the Leaf players, it sounds like he's been dealing with this for a little bit of time and has decided to finally take some time and sit out here and get it looked after. So that's not good. I mean, Campbell's struggled mightily in the last 2 months, really, ever since January, in my opinion. And looking at the stats between him and Mrazek, it's not pretty right now. The Leafs have been able to score their way out of some of those games and certainly, still have a good record. But when you get to the playoffs, like I said, the game's going to change a bit. And if you can't get those big saves at the right time, it doesn't matter how strong your team is on the other aspects of the game. It can be a real killer, right? So we'll see where this goes, but it's Mrazek's opportunity here to kind of run with the crease and play up to what we've seen him do in the past. If he can't do it, then the Leafs could be in at least some short-term trouble, short-term pain here. I don't think they're going to be in any danger, of course, of missing the playoffs, but it certainly could impact their positioning and might force them to play a stronger opponent in the first round than they'd probably prefer, given the fact that right now Tampa and Florida are both ahead of them in the standings, and it's likely that they may end up having to play one of them in that 2-3 matchup, whereas the first place team will get to play a wildcard team. Now, on to some other updates here as well. Blues young defenseman Scott Marinovich is going to be out for an extended period of time as well. He required to have a wrist surgery and is going to be out for about 8 weeks. I know he's a player that's been rumored to be involved in some potential trades as the Blues look to add at the deadline, which we'll talk about here a little bit momentarily, which still wouldn't rule out the fact that he could be included, because he'd be a piece more for the future than immediately with some of these teams anyway. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that. But that injury, I guess it could have an impact, but less likely. Less likely to impact trade status, but certainly impacts his ability to play for this year, which could be, put him out for possibly the rest of the season. Same goes for Stars defenseman Miro Heiskanen, and that's going to be a very interesting development. They've announced today that the Stars have said that he's been diagnosed with mono. Mono can be a long-term thing to recover from. I've seen some people take several weeks, even a few months. That could put him out for the rest of the season. Could end up on long-term injury reserve. The Stars are going to be a very interesting team here. They're certainly in a wild card spot right now. They've had guys like Klingberg and Pavelski, who's been in and out of the trade rumor mill for the last number of weeks here, as it's been unclear what their plan will be. I know Jim Nill kind of made it sound like he didn't want to go into the playoffs with an unsigned Klingberg, knowing he wants out and that he's not going to re-sign. But with Heiskanen too, I don't know that they're going to trade a guy like Klingberg unless they can get back a solid defenseman in return. There was some rumors about Klingberg to Montreal at one point, and there's some rumors about Petrie. It makes you wonder, though, if they might have to relook at things here. There's also been a lot of talk that Pavelski is pretty likely to re-sign in Dallas. So if he's going to be in the playoffs, I guess he's content to stay put and maybe even extend a year or two. He's still playing at a high level at his age, so I can understand the mutual interest. So you might take Pavelski off the trade block. You might take Klingberg off the trade block, whether he likes it or not, because they obviously the Stars control that because of necessity, or they may have to make multiple moves. But losing Heiskanen is certainly going to be a big blow for that blue line. They really can't afford to lose Klingberg too, unless they bring back multiple guys coming the other way. So it's going to be a very interesting situation to watch for sure, and could increase their likelihood of some kind of a deal if they can get some LTIR relief on that front, but also they have some other players on the team to watch too, but Pavelski appears to be off the market. Jerard of the Avalanche is another player who's been sent back home on a road trip, potentially being out longer term. I mean, right now they're saying they're taking it day by day, but it appears there is a possibility it could be a longer term thing. I know beat writer Adrian Dater that covers the Avalanche said, could the Avalanche maybe get some LTIR relief with his contract? So I'm not sure what he knows so far in the situation, but I think it's early to suggest that because we don't know enough about the injury and how long he'll be out. But at the same time, it's another situation to watch where the Avalanche are certainly fighting for, top spot in the Western Conference, and he's obviously one of the top young defensemen there, so we'll see where that goes. A couple quick injury updates for players coming back. Looks like Drake Batherson's close for the Senators. He was spotted at practice today wearing a regular jersey, so he's ditched the no contact, but Coach DJ Smith says he's not quite ready as of yet, probably going to miss a few more games here in this homestand before he's able to go. And Jake Muzzin in Toronto, it looks like right now, unless there's setbacks, that they won't be able to use his contract as LTIR relief to add additional personnel here ahead of the deadline. He has been skating the last few days, and they are very optimistic that he'll be able to return here. I'm not sure exact timelines, but certainly well before the playoffs. So that's probably not going to help matters when it comes to making any significant deals. Now on to the trade section of the day. I want to start with New Jersey Devils and PK Subban drawing some interest. General Manager Tom Fitzgerald's made it known to the player, and I believe he's even made comments as well to the local media indicating that PK Subban is not going to be re-signed. So obviously he's making $9 million right now. So New Jersey's not going to be in the playoffs, so we know that he's not being signed. It just increases the likelihood of a trade happening, but it could complicate things given the fact that he makes so much money. Obviously teams might be interested to some degree, but they're not going to be interested in probably, unless he's a smaller role, third pair guy, or an extra depth piece. He's not quite the defenseman he used to be, so he's not going to get, and his next deal is not going to be anywhere near $9 million. We know that. Assuming he continues playing here, which I have no reason to doubt that he would at this point. He's still fairly young, but like I said, his play's dropped off for sure. But when it comes to Subban, he'd have to probably be traded through a third party for most teams to be able to take that salary on, where it's $9 million. Like if he goes to 50% to New Jersey, knocks it down to 4.5, and then another 50% of the rest, knock it down to 2.25, that might work, but then they're giving up multiple assets. I'm not sure teams are going to want to do that, given what he can bring them. But there has been some chatter around the player that there's, and I guess we'll see. I don't personally see this happening, but there was some talk that the Devils and PK could mutually agree to terminate his contract through unconditional waivers. And then he basically becomes a free agent, could sign with whoever he wanted before the deadline to get on the roster, and he could sign, a league minimum deal for the rest of the season. Now, that would probably upset some people because it's kind of working, your way around with a free agent contract. But the bulk of his money has been paid out, so if they were to do that, he would be losing very little, and of course he'd pick up making additional paychecks with this new team. So it's not like it would really be a major financial loss for him. They could really, really well do that. It just would seem to be an unusual move, but I'm not really convinced it's going to happen. I guess we'll have to keep an eye on it, but there's been some chatter around now. Like I mentioned as well, when it comes to Philly, Travis Sanheim's name is certainly out there a little bit more now when it comes to defensemen after signing Ristolainen, so we'll have to keep an eye on that situation. I know he's still a decent enough young enough defenseman that it would probably gain interest from other teams. But the other player to watch there is Claude Giroux. Captain, of course, we know that his 1,000 game is not too far away, so a trade likely is going to be right near the deadline if it does indeed happen. And another team to watch here, we've talked about the Avalanche, we've talked about the Florida Panthers, and the St. Louis Blues apparently are very much in that mix too. The Blues are a team, as I mentioned, with Scott Perunovich being one of the potential trade pieces that could be used. Marco Scandella is another name to watch for a team that might have to take that contract on just to make the money work from a cap perspective, but of course be other assets in there too in terms of picks or prospects that St. Louis could consider throwing in. But they are reportedly in the mix for Claude Giroux and his services. So I'm not sure what Giroux's preference is, but obviously he's going to have a lot of say over this. But the Blues are a solid team. It's certainly going to be making some moves there. Now, one piece to watch too when it comes to St. Louis and whatever they do for the deadline. There's been some, and I'm not convinced we're going to see this happen, but I've read some articles suggesting that would they consider trading Jordan Binnington? And to me, the answer for right now is no. I mean, Ville Husso certainly earned his fair share of the time in between the pipes for sure. I can see them maybe even giving him the start in game 1 of the playoffs. That wouldn't be a shocker. But you would really deplete your depth between the pipes. Another goalie would have to come back in a deal, ideally making less money. If a Binnington deal was going to happen, to me, it probably happens in the offseason, not now. I think they would want the duo in place. Like, I'm not really sure what kind of deal they could make to bring back another goalie outside of Binnington. I mean, if a trade happens with Claude Giroux, I don't see Binnington being part of the package going the other way. Philly doesn't have a goalie that they're going to want to include. They're not going to trade Carter Hart. That would be probably pretty foolish. So I don't see it happening, but I know there are some out there that think that it might be a chance. But to me, if it does happen, it'd be in the offseason, and it's only going to be once we know who played more in the playoffs, how they make out. There's a lot of things that can happen that would influence that decision. So we'll see where that goes. And lastly here, Brock Boeser is a name that keeps coming up out of Vancouver. We know the Canucks are looking for cap flexibility, according to GM Patrick Allvin and President Jim Rutherford. Amongst Vancouver media and NHL insiders, it seems to be the name that keeps popping up more and more and more. And I know we were talking about Boeser here a few times recently, but the reports indicate that Rutherford really wants a young defenseman in return that can hopefully be a top pair guy and be the partner for Quinn Hughes for a long term. That's kind of where they're looking at here. It might not necessarily be a player who jumps in the NHL like right away immediately, but maybe next year or the year after, like in the near future. Obviously, we've had previous links to the Pittsburgh Penguins, as I mentioned, with Rutherford being quite fond of John Marino. I don't know if the Penguins would do that deal. It would certainly deplete their blue line, but adding Boeser up front makes sense. I mean, essentially what some NHL insiders like Drager and Chris Johnson and a few others have been covering that that angle has been saying that look for a team that is essentially going to have the ability to take on a qualifying offer for Boeser, need somebody who can score, and obviously have a young defenseman they can part with in return. I know Jeff Merrick's covered this as well on the Sportsnet broadcast in the last night, I believe it was last night as well. So, like, what Merrick was saying was look for teams like LA, for example. LA obviously has some interesting young D, like Sean Durzi comes to mind. Brant Clark, who was the 2020 draft right shot defenseman. To me, he's pretty darn good. So he could be a guy to be considered there as well. Of course, like I said, you get the Penguins in the mix. And he also mentioned the Washington Capitals, which I found interesting. I can see the need for that kind of player in the lineup in the forward group here for the Caps, but I'm not really sure that they would have the proper young defenseman going back the other way. That would really be interesting to the Canucks. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really sure that they have that right player in that regard, but those are the teams mentioned by Merrick here just in the last day or so as potential suitors for Boeser. Of course, in the case of LA, they're in the same division. It's probably not a preference that the Canucks would like to do. Pittsburgh at least is the other conference. We know Rutherford and Allvin know that Pittsburgh lineup better than just about anybody, considering they were there and helped assemble the majority of it. So if Rutherford and Allvin are quite high in Marino and they can get that kind of deal, maybe that's something we'll see, but those are reportedly the teams in the mix right now on Brock Boeser. So that is all your news updates for today. Let me know your thoughts on everything discussed down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.